Hello and welcome to today's meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson. My name is Larry Bodine and I'm the president. I'll be your host today. And joining us, we have Nathan Davis, who is running for the State House. Give us a wave, Nathan. All right, we're delighted to have you here. Nathan is a lifelong Tucsonan, and he's a Democratic candidate running for the Arizona House of Representatives. He is running for Randy Friese's seat. He's the current occupant, and I understand he has submitted his resignation, and it will take effect next month, which then opens the seat for the Pima County supervisors to fill. But back to Nathan. Nathan runs a small family business in the Catalina foothills, and previously, Nathan taught middle school social studies in the TUSD. And Nathan is a good precinct committee man and LD9. I see him all the time there. Now he's running for the State House of Representatives for 4 reasons: to ensure that our public schools are fully funded, to rein in these massive tax breaks to special interests while investing in economic opportunity for all Arizonans, to protect Arizonans' fundamental rights, including our right to vote and access to abortion health care. And fourth, he is running to build Arizona into a leader of solar energy and climate resilience. And with that, Nathan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Larry. And thank you, everybody, for being here at DGT. I remember the first meeting I went to was, I think, right after I was recruited to be a PC, and I was like, oh man, this place is amazing. But thank you for having me here again to speak with you all. I'm a former teacher, so the quick breakdown of the lesson plan is going to be, I'll give a quick introduction about myself, my background, and then I'm going to jump right into it. We're going to talk about education, climate change, and abortion. Those are not the only 3 things that I'm interested in that I will be running on and running to fight and protect. But for our time constraints, those are the 3 that I want to hit. Like Larry said, my name's Nathan Davis, and I'm running for the Arizona House in LD9. I was born in Tucson. I went through the public education system here, kindergarten through undergrad. I first got involved in local politics as an intern for Representative Barber back in 2012. I left Tucson for a few years to go to grad school in DC, and I returned in 2016 to help elect Democrats, including Pam Powers-Handley. And I have not looked back at local politics since then. To understand a little about me, I think you need to understand a little bit about how I was raised and who raised me. So I'm the product of our public education system, and I say that proudly. My dad was a teacher in Arizona, and he knew the importance of good education for my sister and me. And I went to one of the best elementary schools in the Northwest, Harrelson Elementary in the Amphi district. And I graduated from Canyon Del Oro High School. At the end of my junior year, my father was hospitalized with pneumonia. He spent the next 15 months in hospitals and hospice. I spent my senior year worrying more about how dad was doing than how my grades were doing. And due to the nature of our healthcare system, dad was transferred to a hospice in Mesa my last month of high school. It was the closest facility that his insurance, the insurance that we thought was great because he was a public school teacher, would cover. And he died in July of 2010. That was incredibly challenging, as you can expect, as you can imagine. He was the only one who went to college out here. My family back home, my family back where his family's from, Southern Illinois, all college graduates since Paul went to college for the first time on the GI Bill. So when he passed, it was like being a first-generation college student. I didn't have the ties out here to really help me guide things, help me guide the system. What I turned to is what many Arizonans turn to, the community college system. I was able to get my Arizona General Education Certificate, which is basically your gen eds from Pima, transferred to the U of A, eventually applied to graduate school, became the first person on my mom's side to have a college degree, and then the first person to have a master's degree. And I became the 3rd generation on my dad's side to have a master's degree. And I'm incredibly fortunate because even though I didn't have someone out here to help me, I went to a great elementary school and a great middle school and a great high school. And it never occurred to me that I wasn't going to go to college. And it was principally because that's what you learn when you go to these types of schools, especially elementary and middle and high school. What I saw when I taught was different. I told my kids, my students, many, 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 many times, you can all go to college. All of you can go to college. All of you can do, U of A or Pima. All of you can do it. And I was told by a few of my colleagues, why don't you push vocation? Why don't you talk about that? And I said, look, they've been told about vocation. These are my kids. My students were half Native American, primarily Yaqui, and half Hispanic functionally. And they've been told about vocation their whole lives, but not about college. And I found that incredibly unfortunate. And it really showed this discrepancy that we see within our school system, our public school system. Every child in Arizona deserves a high quality public education from preschool to college, regardless of their parents' wealth or where they live. That is foundational. That is core to my beliefs. And it's unfortunate that Arizona has failed in this mission. We rank near the bottom on most metrics for education. In terms of pure pupil funding, we're near the bottom. In terms of the percent of our wealth that we invest in the next generation, we're near the bottom. I believe that there are three crucial reforms to improve education outcomes in Arizona: a free, high-quality preschool program, higher investment in K-12 education, which I'll elaborate on, and affordable post-secondary education. So the first one, a free, high-quality preschool program. What I believe Arizona needs to do, and what I will push for when elected to the Arizona House, is for a model based on that used in Washington, D.C. Washington's model is very appropriate for Arizona. They have a fairly good mix of, or a fairly representative mix of public schools, charter schools, and private schools. And I'm not a fan of charter schools, but unfortunately, they're here, they're established. We can't turn the clock back on that one. The DC model has shown high levels of success in terms of student outcome and achievement, including well beyond preschool and elementary school, and in improving employment metrics, especially for mothers. And they do this for in a few ways. One of the really critical things is that preschool education is treated like regular K-12 education. The instructors are college educated. They are paid like teachers. And that is critically important. The pay gets us to higher investment, or one section of the higher investment in K-12 education. Arizona currently ranks very low in public teacher salaries. I don't think that's breaking news to anybody. But the way that we do it is interesting, and the way that we do it, the way that we underpay teachers, really explains why we see certain trends that we see. And I'll use some examples of school districts around here and my cousin's experience back in Illinois. If you want to go teach at most of the schools around here in Tucson, you'll make about $40,000 your first year. In Catfoot, you'll make $900 more your next year. In TUSC, you'll make $500 more. In Vail, I believe it's $1,100 more. Might be a little bit more than that every year. What that means in real spending terms is that a teacher will never make more functionally than their first year teaching, because your increase in your salary is less than inflation. Now especially, but it's been that way in the past, even when we had 2% inflation. That is one of the reasons why we bleed teachers after 3, 4, 5 years. If you teach in rural Southern Illinois, you'll start out making about the same, about $40,000. But every year you get $1,500 more. And that continues until you end your career making $80,000. If you're in Chicago, you'll start off in usually around 60 grand, and you'll end your career making in the low hundreds. If you go to Wyoming, anywhere in Wyoming, and Wyoming is one of the best states for public education, anywhere in Wyoming, even the smallest, most remote rural schools, you'll start out your career making around 50 and you'll end making around 80. Anywhere you go in the United States, and that's what happens. These teachers, they look around and they say, I can move anywhere in the United States and I will earn more and I will have a better retirement. We cannot retain teachers if we do not treat them like professionals, if we do not treat our educators as investments, as public servants. I think a very simple thing that we could do is to essentially say, we're going to pay our teachers like we pay our police and other public servants. Be a simple reform. I don't think it'd be controversial, and we go a long way to retaining our educators. Now, the last thing that I want to go, and I'm trying to be conscious of time, I really want to make sure that we've got time for questions, is affordable post-secondary education. And I encourage everyone, I do this to my students too, read the Constitution. They'd all groan. I'd say, no, actually read it. It's really important. The Arizona Constitution, I encourage all of you to read. And there's one section in particular that I'm going to read to you, which I think is great. It's Article 11, Section 10, and it's talking about our public universities. And this is the thing that I love. Our Constitution is a progressive Constitution that has been hijacked over the last 20, 30 years by the far right. And this is why it's progressive. In talking about our universities, they shall be as nearly free as possible. When I was a sophomore in high school, back in, Obama was getting elected, so 2008, college was incredibly affordable for me, about $5,000 a year. When I was looking at that, I could say, okay, I can work for my family's business, I can make some money, I can install blinds, I can sell furniture, and then I can do college for the rest of it. By the time I graduated, it was $10,000. Today, it's close to $13,000. That's just tuition. Add a few thousand extra dollars for books, and if you're going to live on campus, double it. Arizona students should not have to fork out a mortgage to get a bachelor's degree. It is fundamentally unconstitutional, as is clearly plain in our Constitution. If the Republicans want to continue to underfund education and charge those rates, they can amend the Constitution and they can come to the voters and try to make their case. And as we all saw with Prop 208, we'll reject it. That gets to some of the tax issues. And here's where the problems lie. One of the issues with our Constitution that was enacted around 1990 is a requirement that taxes be approved by a supermajority in the state legislature. The only way we can get around that is through the citizens' initiative and referendum. Another issue is an Arizona Supreme Court precedent that says that a tax cut is the same thing as a tax increase and therefore requires that supermajority. I believe we have the best chance that we've had in a while, as good as last year, to retake the state legislature. Even if we do that, we will not be able to raise taxes or eliminate tax breaks without Republican support. So the question is, how do we get universal pre-K? How do we make higher education affordable? How do we invest in our teachers in our public schools if we can't change the tax system? And there's one way that we can. And this ties back into 1828, the flat tax. We had a massive surplus last year because many people moved to Arizona, because even though we were in the middle of the pandemic, and I don't understand this, and I saw this from my side of the business, business was good for a lot of people. People were able to spend money. and taxes were brought in at pretty record numbers. What the Republicans did is they took essentially all the extra money that was raised and said, we're going to make a flat tax, and we're going to make sure that all that money goes to the richest people in the state. Most people on this call will get, if we fail to repeal the flat tax, most people on this call will get somewhere around 2 number 5s from McDonald's. If you're lucky, some of you will get a 1 number 5. My family will get a 1 number 5. However, Doug Ducey and the wealthy people, they will be able to buy a Mercedes. Right, except for the really wealthy people, they'll be able to buy a few homes. So what we need to do, we need a Democratic majority to take the money that we will probably get next year, the extra money that will come in from taxes. Take as much of that as possible to invest in education. Where we invest, how we invest, the legislators will have to talk about, we'll have to figure out. But it needs to go into public education primarily. So I want to move on to climate change and some of the things that we see there. I don't need to tell you that climate change is an issue. You all felt how hot it was this summer. You all remember the drought last year. We are in trouble. No, I mean, we as a species, but we as Arizonans are in trouble, and we down here are in trouble. And it's not because there's nothing we can do. It's not because, we should all sell our homes now because the end is near. We're in trouble because the people in power are not thinking about the future. They're not thinking about how can I make this state the best place to live in mid-century, at the end of century. We've got people in power right now who are thinking about, how can I get reelected? How can I make sure that this donor over here gets their tax break? How can I kind of finagle the system so that the school district in my district is able to keep more money? Climate change is something that we can work on. Our state can be fine. We can still continue to grow. We can still continue to exist here, and we can still have the industries that we have here. But we have to take action now. And primarily that action is in 2 categories: prevention and mitigation. Prevention is about reducing our dependence on fossil fuels and reducing our emissions down to 0. And if the science progresses and the technology progresses, even going into carbon capture technology, which I believe will be necessary. And carbon capture technology I can expand on. It's not just putting it in the ground or putting carbon dioxide in the ground or storing it. Prevention means we must be at 100% renewable energy by essentially within about a decade. This is not unreasonable. Major utilities in Arizona, TEP and APS, both backed a proposal in the Arizona Corporation Commission to go to an all-renewable economy by 2050. I believe that that's not ambitious enough, but that is a good place to start. It was approved about this time last year, 4-1 vote. Then Governor Ducey got involved and decided to put pressure on the Republicans on the commission and was able to flip 2 of the Republicans from supportive to against. And that failed back in May. The support for 100% renewables is there. And even among the polluters today are agreed that we need to move towards 100% renewables. GM has said that they are moving to an all-electric fleet within 2 decades. We cannot find ourselves behind the ball on this one. And that's what's happening right now. We got to get ahead of it. We got to ride this wave. This isn't just about making sure that things don't get worse. This is about using technology as we have always done to make things better. This is the build back better of what our president has been saying. We can use these technologies, invest in more sustainable, greener agriculture. We can invest in renewable technology and investment, or renewable technology and research, and manufacturing. And we can do all this here. We can be a world leader And I believe that should be our goal. It's time that we start electing candidates who listen to scientists and not the fossil fuel lobbyists. And I'll say this again. Arizona has a choice. Either we take advantage of our naturally sunny climate, we invest in renewable energy production, manufacturing, and research, and we emerge as a global leader in renewable energy generation, production, storage, and technological advancement, or we continue to rely on natural gas and coal mined out of the state for energy production, releasing greenhouse gases and smog in our atmosphere. That's our choice. That's prevention. Going to mitigation. We're going to hit 1.5 degrees globally. We just are. There's no getting around that. We're probably going to hit 2. We might hit 3. Where the tipping point is between things get bad and things get terrible, we really don't know. Climate scientists have consistently been conservative in their estimations of where we're going to be. However, we can take steps now to mitigate the negative externalities of global warming and climate change. I'm sure you all read or saw in the news recently about the investment in Phoenix for greener, cooler pavement. That is an example of an incredibly important investment that needs to be made, and a decision that must be made now. If any of you have driven on we've all done this. We've driven on roads in Pima County. How long does it take before a road is bad to when it's actually fixed? And there's a whole, other reason why we don't invest enough in repairs to begin with. But the point is, if we make the investment now, then that means we see the effects probably 5-10 years down the road, and especially 20 years down the road when things start to get warm. We got to get ahead of this. We can see the wave coming. We can see the fire burning in the distance. We make the preparations now, not when it's at our doorstep. This also must be done in a way that is equitable. It's what we currently see with a lot of issues with climate change right now. The effects of climate change are hitting the poorest and the least ability to invest in their area as possible. So that investment must be made now in climate change mitigation, and it must be made equitably. All right. Running out of time. I want to make sure I have enough time to talk about abortion, because it is I didn't think when I was first thinking about running that this would be the most critical issue of the election, but it is, and I am not backing away from it. Texas, as all of you know, just enacted the most extreme anti-abortion measure in half a century. After a conservative majority on Supreme Court, including all 3 of Trump appointees, failed to intervene, abortion is, for all intents and purposes, unavailable in Texas. The bill makes no exception for rape or incest and deputizes every Texan to sue anyone who helps any woman get abortion care in the state. And if that happens, the person who sues will receive at least 10 grand. Now, this could be from the best friend who gives her a ride to the clinic. It could be from the doctor who performs the procedure or prescribes medication. It's anyone. And what we've seen through polling is that Arizonans opposed the anti-abortion law in Texas. Nevertheless, as soon as it went into effect, Republicans around the state started talking about passing a similar law here. Roe v. Wade, 1973, established the constitutional right to an abortion under our right to privacy. The underlying right established by Roe was reaffirmed several times by the Supreme Court. Let me be clear. If Republicans control the Arizona House and Senate and governor after the 2022 election, they will eliminate abortion care in Arizona. With these recent setbacks, and with a clearly hostile U.S. Supreme Court, and probably Arizona Supreme Court, now dominated by far-right appointees. The Arizona legislature must act to protect our right to privacy, our right to control our body, and ensure legal access to abortion care in our state by codifying the Roe decision into state law. And we can't just stop at protecting legal access to abortion. We must improve access to contraception, to reproductive health care, to comprehensive age-appropriate sex education, and care and support for pregnant moms and young children, and so much more. We must build an Arizona that supports families and children from contraception to graduation. I think I'll go ahead and end there. And Larry, do you want to MC for the questions?
Yes, I am happy to do that. First up, we have a question from Lillian Fox. Go ahead and unmute and ask away.
It always bothers me when people talk about paying for pre-K because Arizona only pays for half-day K, and that needs to be fixed.
It needs to be full-day kindergarten. That's something I should have mentioned. And that's an area, I think half-day pre-K is a really good area where we see kind of the Republican plan, not to sound too conspiratorial. But what happens is the districts that have the tax base to be able to afford a bond to pay for all-day kindergarten have for the most part. So essentially what the legislature has done is said, we're only going to go half, but then most of our constituents are going to be covered by all-day kindergarten because they live in a district that can raise the bond. Essentially, the legislature is shirking its responsibility to provide public education and pushing it to our local school boards. And we saw that happen too with Ducey's and the Republican legislature's unwillingness to do anything about the pandemic and put the onus on our school boards, which frankly don't have the taxing power or the spending power to combat such a catastrophe that we saw last year and the year before.
Thank you very much.
All right, we've got a follow-up question from Lucy Messing. Lucy, go right ahead.
Hi, Nathan. It's very good to see you. And I know you're going to make a fabulous legislator. A couple of questions. One, are you going to seek the appointment that Randy is vacating now? Maybe give you a little head start in the legislature there. And who's your team? Who's your campaign team? Who's helping you out? Who's your manager, treasurer, etc.? Thanks.
Yes, I will be seeking the appointment. I think I just saw an email that Randy might be planning to resign at the end of November. And so, the PCs and LD9 will have, those of you who might not be familiar, we have enough PCs in LD9 that we will first have a vote among the precinct committee people to put 3 names forward to the County Board of Supervisors. And the County Board of Supervisors will then make a decision from those 3 names of who will fill the remainder of the appointment. I will be seeking that. And if you live in LD9, you're a PC, expect to hear from me. My team, my treasurer is Davin Franklin Hicks, great guy. He's worked on a few other campaigns around here. I currently don't have a manager, but 2 of my good friends, Dan Roper and Alex Kack, are both helping me. Alex was my campaign manager when I ran for the Amphi School Board out here.
We have a question from Steve Early, member of our board. Go right ahead, Steve.
Hi, Daniel. It's good to meet you, and thank you for being here. And I'm going to go back to education. I've lived in Tucson for over 30 years. I heard about the school system and how fantastic it was supposed to be for the students and not for the colleges. And yet the University of Arizona reported in the last couple of weeks that they have $1 billion in endowment. Then they reported a couple of days later, we're going to build a $100 million facility on the campus. I want to know why they have $1 billion endowment and why they're taking $100 million of Arizona tax dollars to build another facility.
So the endowment is about right for an institution its size. One of the reasons why they have a large endowment is when you this is the cynical reading of it. The USA rankings and everything like that, they take endowment into account in terms of ranking for a school. So a lot of these schools, especially bigger schools like the U of A with 50, 60,000 students, they need that huge endowment. It allows them to do something like build a $100 million facility. One of the things is that a lot of that money is not from the state and from the taxpayers. That's one of the issues is after the Great Recession, a lot of money was cut to the universities. And that's why we've seen increases constantly to cost to students. And one of the problems too is because there's not enough money coming from the state, these universities, rather than focusing on the education aspect of it or the research aspect of it, they really have to turn towards how can we get students, especially out of state students who don't pay $13,000, they pay $30,000 a year. How can we get them to come over here? That's why you see the massive football stadiums, the new housing complexes that look so grand and they cost $15,000 a year. So that's an issue. It is an issue, and part of it comes down to the perverse incentives that the universities have since the state has cut funding. One of the things that we need to do is not just write a blank check to universities and say, here you go. This is, use this as you see fit. No, we've seen that we really, frankly, can't trust the system. What we need to do is say, here's money for research in this specific area. Here's money to make sure that, if a student graduates with a 3.5 from a high school in Arizona, that they go to your institution for free, etc. But one of the things that, and it's a complicated issue and it's a frustrating issue. And as an Arizona alum, I do really find it frustrating that I see that there's money going into some new facility, but not into research or grants for students, or frankly, to hire more faculty. One of the problems that we see is a lot of faculty is adjunct, meaning that they don't have a lot of benefits, that they don't make really good money at all. And we also see that at a community college level. One thing I do want to say about what Steve said, you came here about the same time I was born in the early 90s. Anyone who taught in Arizona in the early 90s, like my dad did, will know Arizona was pretty decent in public education in the early 90s. We were middle of the road. We were, somewhere in the 34th, 32nd in the nation in a lot of metrics. And it's really been since then that we've seen a decline. And then especially since the Great Recession. So Arizona has not been a basket case for education, forever. This is a recent change.
Arizona was blue when I moved here. We had a full house up in the capital.
Exactly.
All right, we've got another question from Steve Linder. Go ahead, Steve, you're up.
Hi, Nathan. I'm glad to see you. As a retired teacher, you have my full support, and I'm very happy to hear a lot of the things that you're doing. And I hope that I have the pleasure to actually vote for you in the future, and I will. Now, there are people in the state legislature currently who absolutely would like public education to disappear. They would like to defund it. They would like to completely have it disappear off the face of the earth. And they do that by increasing the number of vouchers, going to public parochial schools. Now, I agree with everything you're saying, but my question for you, the first part is, one, if we don't have a Democratic majority, how do you intend to deal with these people and get some of the things done when you know that their philosophy is to have public school disappear? The second question, completely unrelated, is as far as climate change, you don't really mention anything about what I think is the real problem in Arizona in the future, and that's water. What do you see as the future for Arizona and water? Thanks.
See, this is why I need to come back here and talk to you guys again. It's so, I know I got half an hour, but man, there's so much to cover. Let's do that reverse. So we'll start with climate change and water. I didn't mention it because I was looking at the clock. It is critical. It is absolutely critical. We just saw the cuts that are happening. That is primarily going to affect our agriculture. But the other thing, and the other big issue that we're seeing, is we see these cuts. We see historically low rainfall, except for this year, and then we see investment in industries that are heavy water users, or they use a lot of water. For example, the Intel factories going into Phoenix. The reason why there's a chip shortage is because a ton of computer chips come from Taiwan, and the industry uses a lot of water, and Taiwan's going through a drought. My biggest fear is that we have a decade of really a lot of rain, like we've seen. We have, from now until 2029, it is beautiful, it is green, and it is lovely, and no one thinks there's going to be a problem. And then we see the multi-decade droughts like we've seen in the past. Years like now is when we start investing. And right now is when we need to start making sure that we have the water resources available to continue to have 7 to 10 million Arizonans and agriculture and industry that relies on water. And that means requiring the new buildings to be more water efficient. That means having tax incentives and tax credits to retrofit older homes. That means ensuring that actually really having a plan of where we start cutting water, early on. So water is critical. It also, frankly, might mean investing in areas or incentivizing internal migration or movement in Arizona to areas that are more climate resilient. The plateau and the mountains are probably, by a lot of projections, going to be more climate resilient than down here in the valleys. And that might be something that we talk about is, okay, how do we incentivize movement in the state to make sure the state can continue to grow and grow in a sustainable way. Going back to what if there's no majority in the legislature? What happens if I'm in the minority again, or if we're in the minority again and I'm part of a minority Democrats? If Republicans want to do something crazy, they can do something crazy. We don't vote for it. We hold firm. We saw that with their tax bill. It took them until nearly record, into June, to be able to get a budget passed. The reason why is because a few of them are out of their mind. They have crazy ideas, and even the majority of the Republicans think the ideas are crazy. Let the people of Arizona see what happens when you elect Republicans. If Republicans want to work with us, if they want to work on a bipartisan bill, I would be happy to work with Republican colleagues on that. But the place that we start at in that negotiation is the Democratic bill, and we move from there. That, I think, is critical. We have to have solidarity, and we have to have a plan put forward to the people of Arizona to say, this is our bill, and you can compare that to the Republican bill.
The floor is open for a question, and we've got one from Paula Aboud. Go ahead.
Okay, Nathan, good work. You have great democratic values, which I would expect from any Democratic candidate. So I found the most useful skill set at the legislature was, how many Republicans do I know out in the real world that can lobby Republicans to support sane legislation? You're very passionate, and I appreciate that, but that passion has to be channeled into smart politicking, and that's what I found. So how are you going to and the other way is to marshal the public to lobby legislators through email, et cetera. Oftentimes that doesn't work. I think it's more effective to know Republicans. So what's your capacity in knowing Republicans in the business world and making contacts so that they'll support legislation and put pressure on Republican legislators?
It's not as much as, frankly, if I was 50 years old and I've been doing business for 2 decades. I understand completely where you're coming from. And I believe that there are legislators who can do that. My concern is that what we've seen, especially in the last 4 years or so, especially since the Tea Party really, is that the Republicans that are willing to compromise in that way have essentially left politics. There's a few that I spoke with, maybe at this point, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, who were in the legislature and had, reasonable ideas. And whenever I asked them of like, you had this great idea, why did you tweak it to look like this? They'd always say, well, I got told by, at that point it was Mesnard that, that wasn't going to fly. So I changed it to make it more palatable for Republicans. So I think the real way to do it, and this is just a difference of ideas, and I am open to more expertise from yourself as a former legislator. I think one of the ways to do it is to go to the people. I think we've seen that we've gotten really good at the initiative process and the reform and the referendum process. And I think what we need to continue to do is to continue to turn out Democrats in areas that are controlled by Republicans. LD11 I'm thinking of, as well as LD23 up in Phoenix, and LD6, and make sure that the Democrats there don't get discouraged, that they don't think, well, a Democrat's never going to win here, that they continue to be active and support policy and use tools like the request to speak to make their voices heard.
Okay, running out of time. Do we have time for a follow-up?
Well, actually, we've got one other person who wants to ask a question, and then I will ask Nathan to tell us how we can get a hold of him. So, Lillian Fox, you're up. Go ahead and ask your question.
That's
you're muted.
essentially what I'm asking. I wanted to know the email for donations. So you can go back to Paula.
Yeah, I'll put that in the chat. And Paula, do you want to ask your follow-up?
So, stopped the flat tax 10 years ago by putting together forums. And one of the things that I learned from those forums, and those were all around Southern Arizona, and the key point was when we were in Cochise County, we talked to public employees, federal employees, and we talked to a lot of Republicans at those rallies. And those people, the people lobbied their legislators, and they flipped the Republican legislators. Strategy point.
Yeah, that I think is really effective. And that's kind of what I meant also by go to the people is if we give good information, if we tell the public this is what's actually going on, if we combat the disinformation coming from the right, the public will get on board with us. I 100% agree with that. And I think that forums are a great way to advocate. One of the things that is kind of unique with me that I found in a lot of Democratic circles, I don't know if this is true of anybody here, all of my dad's side of the family are Republican. I grew up Baptist, everyone is Baptist. Most people are farmers. And if I didn't know how to talk to Republicans, I couldn't have a conversation at Thanksgiving.
You need to say that when you give your political speeches, because that gives you credibility with a broader base.
Taking a note right now.
Yeah. We'll talk later. That's good. Very good.
But yeah, I think that's an effective way. Tell the people what's up. We saw with Prop 208 and with other initiatives that these are broadly popular, even among the rank and file Republicans. Is Republicans like public education. When you tell them what's actually happening, what their party is actually trying to do, they don't like it. So, that's what we have to do. And that's what we as politicians have to do. In the primary, we focus on the party. We just have to. But then from beginning of August to beginning of November, we work our butts off to let everyone know. Rex Scott, I think, provided the best example of how we reach out to everyone we possibly can. He was able to take a district that voted twice for Allie Miller and was able to win. And so I think that his strategy is an effective blueprint for Democrats moving forward to communicate to independents in those kind of flippable districts, which hopefully when redistricting happens, we're going to have a lot more of, as opposed to gerrymandered districts.
Right, Nathan, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate hearing from you. Please tell us how we can get a hold of you, how we can support you, and how we can make sure you're in the legislature.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It was great to speak with you all again. You can get a hold of me. I put my phone number and my email in the chat. That's my campaign cell. Feel free, call or text me anytime. The email too, that goes right to my phone. And I also put my Act Blue page in there. I am running traditional. I'm not running clean, and that's primarily because we frankly can't for many races run clean, because as we saw last time, the Republicans have a lot of money, mostly from out of town, mostly from out of state, and they're willing to spend a lot to just pour as much as possible. That's one reform that we must do, is we must make that campaign finance, the public financing, more robust. But please write down my phone number, give me a call anytime. If you are a PC in LD9, you will be able to support me for the appointment, which will probably take place in late November, early December. And if you live in vaguely LD9, LD11, LD10, we'll see how redistricting happens and how the district will look after that. Probably we'll know that in January.
We have some announcements. Kathy Ramage White, tell us why people
You
should
betcha. Good to see you. My announcement is join DGT. It's only $20. It'll carry you into next year too. You get to be with all the good Dems who know what's going on. It's fun stuff. So you can go to the dgt.org and sign up through that, and it's fun. So it's right back to you, Larry.
All right. Well, thanks very much. I believe we have Sandy Binion, who can tell us about our upcoming meetings.
Thank you, Nathan, for agreeing to taking our invitation to speak today. Coming up next week, we have Dr. Cullen from the health department, the head of the health department. And following that, we have Aaron Lieberman, who is running for governor of Arizona. And to round out the month, we have Adrian Frances, who is running for Secretary of State of Arizona. So we're got a good lineup and hope to see all of you there, and hope you all signed up as a member of DGT.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sandy. I know it's a lot of work and we really appreciate it. Lucy Messing has her hand up. Go ahead, Lucy.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank everyone who carried petitions and who helped us collect the signatures for our education tax issues. Unfortunately, we weren't able to file for 1827, and 1783 probably will not survive a challenge because it does not have enough. But we're confident that we will have the flat tax 1828 on the ballot in 2022. And in my opinion, it is the worst of the three tax laws that were implemented. So that's going to be our campaign for November 22, 1828. A couple of things. The Tankerverde Dems are having their drop-in this Saturday. We are welcoming Sharon Edgar, who is a individual who has followed redistricting. She attends all the meetings. She puts out very meticulous notes. And so she will be one of our speakers. And then we're having a gentleman by the name of Josh Jacobson. He wrote an op-ed as to why perhaps the $15 minimum wage is not necessarily the way to go. We already had the pro side of the initiative last month, and they couldn't come together. So we're having the other side this month. And then last but not least, our Education Council is meeting this Thursday at 4:30 on Zoom. So if you're interested, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your hard work getting those petitions signed and delivered. Everybody really appreciates it, and we're all so grateful to you. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
Let me turn now to Shirley Muni, who's got her hand up. Go ahead, Shirley.
Hi. You probably remember that Great Decisions is an organization dealing with small group discussions about foreign policy. And we're having a program that is open to the public on Thursday, October 28th. It will cost $10 by Zoom. The link will be sent to everybody who's registered in advance, and I will put the website in the chat for anyone who wants to go to our website and either download the flyer and write a check and mail it in, or you can pay by credit card through our website. The topic is the Abraham Accords, if you remember, that was signed a few months ago between Israel and some other countries in the Middle East. Discussion is whether or not this will actually lead to peace in the Middle East. The speaker is Dr. Jeremy Pressman from the University of Connecticut. He's an expert on the Middle East, and it should be a fascinating discussion. So I'll put that website in the chat. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Shirley. We also have Paula Aboud. Paula, I understand you had some success recently with the districts for the Justice of the Peace.
In the world of redistricting, the Justice of the Peace was redistricted this year after the first time in 20 years. And Paul Eckerstrom and I worked for 6 months on the maps, coordinating, strategizing, and putting together the best map, the fairest one, and also gives, I believe, Democrats a fair chance to win in districts that they don't normally have an opportunity to win in. But option one succeeded thanks to the emails that many of you sent to the supervisors. In fact, Rex Scott said he was deluged with emails. So yay, Democrats. I think that the Republicans kind of woke up about a week before and realized that JP redistricting was happening, but they were no match for us. So thank you all for your help, your support, and support your justices of the peace. The Democrats that are probation officers really know how important it is to have a good and compassionate judge on the bench to be fair for all people. So thanks to Lee and Shirley and all the people that contributed emails.
Thank you, Paula. I was one of the people who sent an email to Rex Scott, so I'm glad to be part of the big group of Democrats. All right, Nathan, thank you so much. We're out of time. It was very inspiring to hear you. I'm sure I speak for a lot of us here that we want to support your effort to flip the legislature. And with that, we're out of time. So I want to wish you and everybody else a wonderful rest of the week. And we'll see you next Monday at Democrats of Greater Tucson.